Weight loss solutions are not one size fits all. Hers makes it simpler to get started and stick with a weight loss plan, backed by expert-guided online care that puts your weight loss goals first. These include oral medication kits or compounded GLP-1 injections. Through Hers, pricing for oral medication kits start at just $69 a month for a 10-month plan when paid in full upfront. No hidden fees, no membership fees. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. Hers brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first. Reach your weight loss goals with help through Hers. Get started at forhers.com/4u to access affordable, doctor-trusted weight loss plans. That's forhers.com/4u, forhers.com/4u. Paid for by Hims and Hers Health. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions at forhers.com. Apply. We all know that owning a small business means you wear many hats, but sometimes you really need an extra pair of hands. Upwork is how good companies find great and trusted freelance talent. With more than 2 decades of experience, with the simple and ambitious goal of pioneering a better way of working, companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in staffing key projects and initiatives. They access a global marketplace filled with top talent in IT, web dev, marketing, and more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, and get help drafting a job post or even book a consultation. From there, you connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them and take your business to the next level. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com.
Rise up! Free press! Rise up! Free press!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up Secret podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from Cardswire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site, covering, of course, the Arizona Cardinals, episode 696. This is the first of 2 Week 2 Cardinals-Panthers preview show. This is the opponent preview, and joining me for this edition of the show is someone you just heard from just a couple of months ago, Jared Feinberg, who does a little bit of everything from all the places. SI, he covers the Panthers, he covers the Rams, he covers the Jaguars, and he's our Panthers guy from the Panthers Wire. So, Jared, welcome back. It seems like it was just the other day, and I realized it's been a solid 2 months since.
Yeah, it's been a couple months.
Last time.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back on here. We did this last season for Arizona's trip to Carolina. That was a fantastic football game to watch. I think for both teams. I mean,
for the Panthers.
For the Panthers, yes, absolutely. I think if you're a true football fan, that was just a great game to watch. I mean, both teams having runs of scores and everything between. It was a fun matchup, and hopefully we get that same matchup, that same type of back and forthness this upcoming weekend.
Yep. So we get to talk Panthers. Now, what we're going to start with is we're going to start with week 1, and that unfortunately wasn't very pretty. The Cardinals had an ugly win, but the Panthers had a terribly ugly loss, 26-10 to the Jacksonville Jaguars, in which they did really nothing well. They didn't look good offensively. Defensively, they were run all over. But going back to the game last year, that was the only loss the Cardinals had to a team that didn't win 10 or more games. And that's what that last season, that the Panthers game was kind of the stake in the heart that kind of ended their season. They ultimately, that if they had won that game, that still wouldn't. They needed to win. They need to either beat the Rams or the Seahawks in one of those 2 matches. But the the Panthers game was the rough one because there are other losses you could look and say, okay, because Cardinals being a fairly mediocre team last year, they beat the teams they should have beat, and they lost to teams that ended up in the season being better than them and were in the playoffs or won double-digit games. So we look at what the Cardinals, the Panthers don't have a great history for the Cardinals. I think the Panthers have won 7 of the last 8 matchups, but that's not what we're talking about yet. Look back. Tell us what happened in week 1 against the Jaguars at 26-10. When I looked back at it, I'm like, oh, the Jaguars are good. Oh, the Trevor Lawrence didn't play particularly well. 200 rushing yards. Oh, Jags ran for 200. Oh, 3 turnovers by Bryce Young. Oh no. What happened in week 1?
Everything that could have gone bad for the Panthers went bad in week 1. It basically turned into what the worst of the Carolina Panthers from last year basically showed up again this year, or at least for week 1. The Panthers just got ran over by Liam Cohen's offense, and credit to Liam Cohen. He's one of the most creative, if not the most creative, run game play caller out there. The motions, the shifts, the designs, the concepts that he deployed against the Carolina Panthers linebackers absolutely toyed with them. Trevin Wallace was arguably one of the worst players for the Panthers. I would say maybe the worst Panther on Sunday. He basically bit the cheese on any motion, any fake. It was downright horrendous from Trevin Wallace, who had apparently had a very good camp. Now, Panther fans were allowed at training camp because the facilities in Charlotte were being worked on, so fans weren't allowed. That meant mainly the media was allowed to go and give and share their observations, but really the Panther fans had only seen the only 3 preseason games, and also week 1, and it's not been good. No wins to hang your hat on, nothing to feel hopeful, optimistic about what could come for coming weeks. It was not the game the Panthers need to start out. They got outcoached on both sides of the ball. It's almost like they weren't prepared, but they didn't exactly come out flat. I thought they came out pretty physical against Jacksonville. It was starting to become really just a tight physical ball game before a lightning delay. And then right after that, the Panthers had an offensive drive that stalled. Get the ball back to Travis Etienne, who had that 71-yard run. And it was basically an avalanche from there. So the Panthers struggled defensively against the run. I thought they were good in the secondary for the most part. I think that's going to be a strength. Offensively, Bryce did have 3 turnovers, but after watching the tape, I thought he was bad, but wasn't as bad as people thought. I would definitely say week 1 last year was 10 times worse than week 1 this year, because Bryce he still showed a little bit of what we saw towards the end of last season with Bryce. He was accurate on all 3 levels. He had a reliable weapon in Tetero McMillan. He had playmakers that just weren't stepping up to the plate. Xavier Leggett, their first-round pick from about 2 years ago now. It was just a cascade effect or event for Carolina. And it's really hard to put into words what happened in that game, because it was nothing I expected. It was nothing I think anyone on the team expected. So they got outcoached. They got outplayed by Jacksonville fair and square. And now they have to move on to this matchup against Arizona on the road in Arizona. And the Cardinals are expected to be a pretty solid football team this year. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you think of this team after 1 week. I think this is more of an extension of the preseason. So I guess both teams are starting out a little bit rougher than expected against opponents either they should beat or they should have beaten or should have beaten big time. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, but also, I'm not ready to hit the panic button on Carolina yet. I'm kind of want to see how these first 4 or 5 weeks go. If nothing's really changing, then I'm going to have a lot of concerns, hit the panic button and be like, okay, things aren't going well and something needs to change. I don't know what that will be. So we'll see what happens over the next few weeks.
I do have a question. So how did Ted McMillan look in his NFL debut? He led the team, 5 catches for 68 yards, had a 21-yarder. How did that connection between him and Young look?
It looked fantastic. McMillan was as advertised. And look, I'll admit I was a little lower on McMillan coming out of Arizona, but seeing him in person at the Panthers Fan Fest, or special training camp practice for fans to go out and watch, seeing him up close in person, also just seeing him on the field in week 1 and basically being uncoverable for some chunks. It was very impressive to watch him play. I thought he was great in his debut. He didn't exactly blow the world up, but he showed why he was the number 8 overall pick, or at least showed flashes. And that's what impressed me a lot. I thought he also showed improvements as a route runner, something I was concerned about coming out of college. And also he did a good job separating from defenders, which I also thought was a concern out of college. So the things he improved on were the things I needed to see. Now, can he keep it going consistently over the next several weeks? We'll see. I'm very intrigued with the matchup between him and Will Johnson, rookie Will Johnson for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm looking forward to that matchup this weekend. But McMillan, Young, I think that's going to be a really good connection this year. And hopefully, if the Panthers are lucky, for the next 5-10 years, if it works out.
Nice. Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gadden has had some really, really nice things to say about lots of players on the Jaguars. He mentioned in particular Christian Roseboom, the addition from the Rams, and Trayvon Merrick, safety. They led the stat sheet in terms of tackle production. I know tackles doesn't necessarily mean it was a good game. How did they look? How did they look in preseason, and how did they look as major parts of the defense in week 1?
In the preseason, I thought they were okay in the time they did play on the field. It was only for a few drives, really, total from the first 3 preseason games, or at least the first 2, they didn't really play at all in the third one. Then last week, it was just a nightmare. They were undisciplined. They were out of their landmarks. They couldn't do anything really well overall. I thought they were solid in their run fits in some instances, but overall it was not a good situation to show that Carolina has a major weakness at linebacker, considering the history at that position for that franchise with Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, John Beeson, Dan Morgan, and now Morgan's the general manager. You would expect the general manager, who has a great history of being a part of this franchise, but also knowing a thing or two about the linebacker position and the importance of that position for that franchise, that they never really truly addressed the position in the offseason. And that was a curious decision. We'll see if Wallace and Roseboom can rebound, but right now it's not off to a great start. If this continues, I think the Panthers need to make a move at the position.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Series podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk of the Web. Let's move on and start looking at this matchup, keys, matchups, and more. That's coming up next on Rise Up Series. We're back on the Rise of Series podcast. It's our Cardinals Talk on the web. It's episode 696. We're talking to Jared Feinberg, talking about the Carolina Panthers, whom the Cardinals play at State Farm Stadium this Sunday, 1:05 p.m. local time, 4:05 Eastern. So what do now, I will say this, the Panthers, they have a very unfavorable schedule. They have to play on the road in 2 consecutive home openers. They Jacksonville opened up at home. That was their home opener. Week 2, you come to Arizona. That's the Cardinals' first home game. So that adds a little extra all the time. If you're looking at this game, if you're looking at this matchup, and if there are 2 or 3 things that you think have to happen for the Panthers to be able to complete with / upset the Cardinals in week 2, how would that happen? What are kind of the keys for them for being successful?
I think it starts in the trenches, and that was the key last week. And last week I saw the offensive line for Carolina do a steady job against Jaguars' defensive front, but they did have some issues. They didn't have Akeem Ekwonu due to appendicitis. He's questionable, assuming for this coming week. But I do think he makes his debut this week. But Panthers offensive line, again, was steady, but they did have some moments. Their center, Austin Corbett, has some issues with snaps. It was not a great day for the center position for Carolina. So that needs to be cleaned up. But defensively, that's where I'm kind of keeping my eye on, because they did lose Tershawn Wharton for a couple weeks due to a hamstring injury. He is like a 2 to 4 week time frame for his potential return. So you got to see guys like Derek Brown, who's slowly starting to get going again after coming back from a torn meniscus. Yeah, Bobby Brown, a true nose tackle who can really get after it and create penetration up front. And the Cardinals have plenty of history with Bobby Brown. So that'll be another intriguing matchup up front. And then Ashawn Robinson, a veteran from last year, who was probably their top run defender, considering everyone that was not so great last year for Carolina. So I'm really curious about the interior front. In terms of pass rush, Carolina was one of the worst pass rushing teams last week because they had 0 sacks. They only had a few pressures overall. It was not a great day for Carolina in the edge rushing department. Pat Jones and DJ Wanham kind of underwhelmed in that area. You didn't see the rookies. Nick Scorton and Princely, I'm going to try to say this right. Uman Mielen. I think I said it right. And
Mielen, I believe it is.
Mielen. Gotcha. Okay. It's always a struggle with me on that one. That's always been the last name that I've always.
I would have loved the Cardinals to have drafted him, and then I'd have to be dealing with it every week. Princely Uman Mielen. Mick Scourton, didn't he have a little bit of a health thing? Was that him?
He did.
How did that play out? Did it clear up, or
it did? So he was active this past weekend, and he actually had a collapsed lung after joint practice with the Texans a few weeks ago, and he's fully recovered from that. But you would love to see the Panthers get their young edge rushers involved a little bit more. I think Dave Cannell has kind of hinted Monday afternoon that he wants to see some of his younger players defensively to get involved, kind of push his assistants to kind of get them going early on as well. So you may see those rookies, but also a matchup I'm curious about is if they move Nick Scorton inside a little bit for some key matchups, maybe some mismatches with a pass rusher lined up in the 3-tech, maybe they go a NASCAR package. So the trenches for me for Carolina are going to be key, but I also hope that, the linebacker room can stay steady in their run fits, especially against James Conner in that run game, and also staying home against Kyler Murray, his rushing ability, his scrambling ability. I think Carolina will need to use the spy, even though I feel like they probably won't, knowing this system. I don't know if they have the feasible talent to do so. But overall, again, it's the trenches. It always comes down for the trenches for me, especially in these key matchups. It was a key for me last week, and Jacksonville basically won on both sides of the ball in their week 1 matchup. But Arizona, Carolina in the trenches on both sides of the ball, that's going to be the biggest key for Carolina if they are to win this game.
I think I think what will be really fun to watch on for both ends is the matchup of J.C. Horn against Marvin Harrison, and then Will Johnson potentially against Ted McMillan, just because of the youth that we have. Horn, one of the better cornerbacks in the league. He's really good. Marvin Harrison Jr. coming up this year had a pretty solid game in week 1, and then on the other side, because you got Ted McMillan, he's a rookie. You've got Will Johnson who's a rookie. Johnson, who had a fantastic start to his career last week, picked off a pass that got negated, broke up 3 other passes, looked like the player that should have been drafted in the middle of the first round. How will the Panthers handle Trey McBride? Will they put a corner on him? Will they use linebackers or safety more, or how will they go about that? Because we saw a little bit last week in the season opener that the Saints actually put a cornerback on him, which, like, with a guy like McBride, okay, he can keep up with me, but I'm 6'5", so
yeah. I think in situations last week when Carolina went to man coverage, they put their nickel, Charles Smith-Wade, on the tight end, Britton Strange, and I thought they had some decent success against that. But the Panthers overall, they're a zone-heavy team. They're going to put their linebackers and their safeties in coverage shells. That's kind of the situation they're going to be in. And then I'll say this: I think this is the week they're going to really try to deploy more 3 safety looks with Trayvon Moorg, Nick Scott, and then Lathan Ransom, their 4th round pick out of Ohio State, who can come downhill and knock the crap out of offensive playmakers. Ransom is someone I'm excited about in this secondary, especially this season. Once he gets more playing time, I think he is the type of energy and the physicality that the secondary is missing. I just wasn't overly impressed with Nick Scott this past weekend. So I think Ransom, if he gets more playing time, you're going to see maybe more come up in the slot as a big nickel, or even play a little bit man, or maybe some match coverage against Trey McBride. That's going to be an intriguing matchup. And I assume McBride's going to see perimeter reps. So you'll see him matched up with J.C. Horn from time to time. I'm excited about that matchup. But McBride's going to be really one of the most difficult matchups for Carolina. It was a difficult matchup last time around. It will be another difficult matchup this time around. But I think they have the personnel to potentially at least limit McBride's big plays. And if so, that gives Carolina a bigger chance to get a victory on the road in Arizona.
Coming up next on the Rise of Syria podcast, Best Our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on. Let's look at some picks and predictions. What do we think is going to happen this weekend? That's coming up next on Rise of Syria. We're back on the Rise of Syria podcast, Best Our Cardinals talk on the web, talking to Jared Feinberg, talking about the Panthers, Cardinals-Panthers week 2, as we now hit the prediction part of this. The Cardinals are heavy favorites at home at 6.5 points. They are in their home opener. The Panthers looked bad. The Cardinals, though, didn't look great in week 1. My opinion on that is New Orleans. Now, they weren't sharp, but the Saints offered some. I think the Saints are going to be a better bad team than people think. I think they're going to be like the Cardinals were in 2023. They're going to be dreadful. They're bad. They're not going to win many games, but they're going to be a competitive bad. And I think that starts with their defense, with Brandon Staley leading the way. The Panthers and the Saints, they engaged in an ugly game plan. They engaged in ugly football. They sold out against the run defensively. They were schemed really well. And then offensively, it was just don't mess things up. Basically, a potpourri of things that they were left for. And they just got the ball out early. They weren't going to let Spencer Rattler hold the ball too long. And so they said 2 seconds, ball out. So if it was dink and dunk and dink and dunk and dink and dunk like that. And so I think, especially especially seeing the Panthers play in week 1, then perhaps hopefully they're not as that bad. I think the Panthers will offer less of a challenge schematically than the Saints did, especially since there's a week of film on them.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm looking at for Dave Canales, and it was an issue last week, was can he disguise some of the tells he's been kind of showing in recent weeks, or at least last week? And it felt like the Jaguars had every answer for the Panthers. Will this Arizona Cardinals defense have the answers for this Panthers offense? I think this week you're going to see a little bit more aggressive Carolina offense because they're pretty ticked off about what happened last week. Everyone in that building knew that was an unacceptable result that should have never happened in the first place. And I think they're going to try to do their best to correct that. Now, it could cause an overcorrection where it may force some mistakes. I'm expecting some miscues, especially, in the middle of the field on defense. On offense, maybe there's more snap issues with Austin Corbett, maybe more drops, maybe more inconsistencies from the playmakers outside of McMillan. But the thing I'm really looking at is, can Bryce Young continue to put his team in a better position to win? Because he knows those turnovers aren't acceptable. He needs to get that right. If he can keep the ball clean, overall good ball security, I think he gives Carolina a chance. But this is going to be an interesting matchup for both sides. I think both teams have a chip on their shoulder one way or another, and they're going to have to prove that, hey, if Arizona starts 2-0, this is a team that could start gaining momentum for others outside of Arizona, like, oh, maybe Arizona might be something here, especially if they have a commanding win over Carolina. Now, if Carolina wins, now the narrative is for Carolina, oh, they were just trying to get their feet going week 1, looked good in week 2, heading to their first home opener against the Atlanta Falcons. Could they keep that momentum going? We'll see. But I think this Panthers offense misses Jalen Coker a bunch. He's out for the next few more weeks because of a quad injury that he suffered in practice about a week before the regular season started. So that's why they signed Hunter Renfrow back to the team. I don't know if Renfrow is going to be that reliable slot receiver he used to be. So we'll see how he performs in the slot this coming weekend. But this team needs Jalen Coker. They need him bad. And if things don't improve, Jalen Coker is going to be a much welcomed return come week 5 is... It's not New England. I'm very bad with trying to think of schedules ahead of time. I should know this as a Panthers guy, but apparently not.
Miami. No,
Miami.
Dallas.
Dallas.
Week 4 is Miami. Week 5 is Dallas.
Gotcha. So those games I'm going to be very...
Sorry, it was Patriots week 4 to Miami week 5. I don't know how to read.
I think Miami could be a very favorable matchup for Carolina that week. But
especially if Miami looks the way they looked last week. Ooh.
Yeah, that could get ugly. Very ugly for Miami. But I'm expecting a good game between Arizona and Carolina. I think both teams have something to prove, especially Carolina. I think Carolina's going to have the bigger chip on their shoulder after what happened last week.
You had to pick. Do you have a prediction for us? Do you have a prediction for final score?
I think Arizona's going to get the win, but it'll be a closer game than anticipated. I'm going to go 21-17 Arizona.
Ooh, kind of an ugly game.
A little bit.
I think so. The Cardinals last year, when they won, a lot of the times they won big. I think this is going to be a double-digit win for the Cardinals. I'm saying 28-17. that it kind of slows up. But we'll have to wait and see because the Cardinals played an ugly game last week. We'll see how that goes. Now, let me throw some props at you. Not necessarily that you because we've got listeners that do like the props and things like that. So we've got touchdown passes. Bryce Young over or under 1.5 touchdown passes.
1.5, you said?
Yes.
Over.
You can cash in big then. That's a plus 185. What about interceptions? Over or under half an interception, or will he throw one or not, basically?
I'm going to say no. Under.
Okay. All right. It's pretty even. The VIG gives the over slightly longer odds at minus 120 than with the under, which is minus 110. Let me see. Chuba Hubbard, over or under 65.5 rushing yards?
I'm going to say even. I think Carolina's run game will feature a little bit more Rico Dowdle. I think they want to get him involved. I think Bryce Young will use his legs a little bit like he did last week. So I think even's a pretty good that's a pretty good odds for Chuba Hubbard overall.
Okay. How about Rico Dowdle at 17.5? Over or under 17.5 rushing yards? He only had 12 in week 1.
Let me stick with just being under 17.
Okay. What about Bryce Young, 15.5 rushing yards? He did run wild on the Cardinals last year. I think Bryce Young, go over 15.5. That's an easy bet for me.
Yeah, it's over for me with that. I think Bryce is going to definitely use his legs at some points because he's so hard to contain in the pocket. Like when he's at his best, you have to account for him outside the pocket and also on the ground. Like he can get some chunk yards, as Arizona Cardinals fans saw last year with that long run early in the game that was able to put, I think it was a touchdown leading drive for Carolina on that one. But I do expect Bryce Young to definitely have over 15 yards on the ground.
And defensively, how many turnovers do you think that the Panthers will takeaways that the Panthers will have defensively?
None. I think Kyler can protect the football in this game, especially against the Panthers front. I'm not overly trustworthy. I think Carolina's going to give Kyler plenty of time in the pocket. I expect Kyler Murray to protect the football, keep it at bay. There may be some turnover-worthy plays, of course, but I think overall Carolina isn't able to get a takeaway this coming weekend.
All right. And we will wrap this up. That is Jared Feinberg talking to us about the Carolina Panthers, our enemy preview. We will have one more show this week as Seth and I will preview the show ourselves with our preview, picks, predictions, and props. And then on the written end, we will see some joint content from Anthony Rizzuti, who will answer some of my questions to preview the game as well. Thank you, Jared, for your time. Of course, you can find Mr. Jared Feinberg on the social medias. You find him at JRod NFL Draft, and you can find him talking about a lot of teams because he covers a lot of teams right now.
That's
Jared,
the truth.
thanks for the time. Thanks for the time, man. We'll have you. Well, who knows what the. Who knows when we'll get the Panthers yet? But I mean,
could be another
playoffs.
We'll see.
Thank you, man. That'll wrap it. This is the show. Seth and I will be back soon. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise up, Sea Red.
Rise